So why is it so important for us as scientists to be effective communicators with the general public? Well, two examples that Mary Woolley gave during her talk last year have stuck with me and were really kind of the driving force for organizing today's forum. First, she said that politicians frequently tell her that whenever they have held a town hall meeting, that not one of their constituents has ever stood up and said, "What are you doing for me on behalf of biomedical research?" Found that somewhat alarming. If the practical aspects and benefits of scientific research are not on the radar of the voting public, it's not going to be on the radar of the policymakers in Tallahassee or in Washington, D.C. And the second, Mary mentioned that if the money that Americans spend on gift cards, so in the year 2010, it's proposed that approximately $24.8 billion will be spent on gift cards. If that same amount was invested in NIH research, that would fund 55,491 NIH grants. So we're talking at $25 to $50 for a gift card versus investing that money in the biomedical research of the nation. It really wouldn't take much if we can get the public interested to make those donations. That same amount would also fund the National Cancer Institute for approximately 5 years. Okay? So we need to educate the public as to what we do and why it's important. Well, needless to say, she got the attention of this bald-headed, gray-haired physiologist. But what struck me was that while I needed to kick up my effort on this, more importantly, I realized that we needed to begin implementing this into the training process of our young trainees. I contacted Mary Woolley afterwards and asked her if she knew of any training opportunities or courses that we might be able to participate in or learn from to develop our own training program here at USF for our future scientific investigators. In addition, how could some of our trainees learn about career opportunities in science advocacy? The result of our discussion is today's Media and Science Forum, which will probe such issues as how the changing face of journalism is affecting public understanding of research, whether the deliberate pace and complexity of research can survive the 24-hour news cycle, and how science and journalism might work together to improve science and media literacy. So please sit back and listen and learn and participate in the question and answering periods. Use the microphones. And to my faculty colleagues, I welcome your ideas afterwards on how we can begin implementing the training and insight we get today into our students' curriculum at USF to make them better advocates for science. So there are many people to acknowledge and to thank for helping today's events becoming a reality. Beginning last April, Dr. Karen Holbrook, Senior Vice President of Research and Innovation and Global Affairs, and President of USF Research Foundation. I should also add a former member of the board at Research America. She put me in touch with Dr. Karen Liller, the Dean of the Graduate School, and Dr. Robert Potter, Associate Dean for Graduate and Undergraduate Studies, to begin a dialogue with staff at Research America. I'd like to just briefly introduce the Research America folks. Where are they? We have Heather Jameson, and we have Ellie Dahoney. Thank you. Bill Lineweaver, and Suzanne Folks, and Jack Waters, who is here from Pfizer, also a partner in today's forum. I pointed them out so that students and trainees, actually anyone, can have the chance to talk to them once the session's over today at 2:30. In addition, there's a number of folks at USF I need to thank for their input in making today's events a reality. I already mentioned Dr. Karen Holbrook, who is helping to supply the costs for some of today's events, but also the support of Dr. Steve Plasko, Senior Vice President of USF Health and Dean of the College of Medicine, Dr. Bill Marty, Associate VP for Research at the College of Medicine. Added to this list of folks who helped are Mr. Michael Hode, VP of Communications, Ms. Ann Byer of USF Health Public Relations, and from whom I borrowed quite a bit of my introductory comments today. Thank you very much, Ann. In addition, Mr. Mark Walsh, the Legislative Liaison of USF Government Relations, and our other USF participant in today's forum, including Dr. Robert Wilcox, Provost and Executive Vice President of USF, and Dean Eric Eisenberg, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Thank you one and all, and my apology to anyone I may have omitted. Finally, I would also like to acknowledge a special guest, Mr. Clint Chu, Regional Representative for Congressman Gus Billy Rackus of the 9th Congressional District. There you are. Thank you. Welcome. And I look forward to talking with you after the event today. So I'd like to end with a quote by Mary Woolley that is really at the heart of what we hope to accomplish today. And it says that at a time when scientific discoveries are having far-reaching consequences for consumer health, it has become increasingly important for scientists and journalists to work together to improve both science and media literacy. By communicating effectively with media, scientists will enhance the public's trust in the research enterprise and galvanize support for research as policymakers contend with competing budget priorities. Welcome to our colleagues in the media, and thank you for your participation today in our forum. And I look forward to working with you and learning how to become a better advocate for science. So, moving on, I am pleased today to introduce Mary Woolley, President and CEO of Research America, the nation's largest nonprofit alliance working to make research to improve health a higher national priority. Along with serving on the Governing Council for the Institute of Medicine and the National Academy's Board of Life Sciences, Mary is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and serves on the National Academy's Board of Life Sciences. She's a founding member of the Board of Associates at the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research, and she is a sought-after speaker with a 30-year editorial publication on science advocacy and related topics. Today, she will be presenting the results of a recent poll conducted by Research America on Florida public opinion on science. Mary, welcome to sunny Tampa, Florida, and USF.
My mother would appreciate that introduction, and has already heard from me over and over again, my mother, how much I enjoy going around the country and having the opportunity to talk to leaders in science, as I did with you last year, Jay, and just seeing where that takes us, how many opportunities we might be able to develop to work together, to connect some dots for people in this country who fundamentally really believe in science and in research for health in particular, but don't understand how they can learn more about it, whether they need to learn more about it, where it's being conducted, how to support it when it's at risk, and is it at risk, and want to know more via media outlets that they already trust and look to for information, for observations, to help them think about the future of their health as brought by research. So I personally believe that it's the young scientists, young communicators, young media professionals of tomorrow who are going to connect those dots for our fellow citizens. So it's very exciting and I think important to work with you to try to understand how to do a better job of it. If Research America can play a role in that regard, so much the better. So today, I want to talk to you not so much about Research America. Jay's told you a little bit about us, and I want to thank USF for being a member of ours, and the provost, Dr. Wilcox, and all of you. And to acknowledge that one of our board members is here today and will serve on a panel, and that's Dr. Jack Waters. Jack, thank you for being here, for your support. I do want to spend my time, though, talking to you about a recent public opinion poll that we commissioned here in Florida. Now, one of the aspects of our work is commissioning polls. It's not by any means the only thing we do, but we commission polls so that we can keep a finger on the pulse, if you will, of public opinion about issues concerning research, and especially research for health, and the organizations and the individuals who are engaged in research. Sometimes we also ask about media, and both of those topics were covered in the poll that we recently conducted. Now you can see from this slide that we conducted a poll in Florida in the past. It's now 15 years ago plus. But it's the same kind of methodology, except in the past we weren't so much going to internet sources of information or cell phones and the like. And now the technology's changed quite a bit. But it's still basic public opinion polling, the same kind you read about in the newspapers, on the web, all the ways you get information that can range from, what's the scariest kind of Halloween movie, which was in USA Today as a public opinion poll, to how are the Republican candidates for president doing in the polls and everything in between. It's the same kind of polling that we commission. So a few things are about the same as they were 15 years ago, and some things are very different. For example, with this question, which is asking people, and this, as I say, is in Florida, what they believe is the single most important health issue facing this country. Now, 15 years ago, as you'll see here, people overwhelmingly said that it was HIV/AIDS. And 20 years ago, that percentage was higher still, because, of course, it was a death sentence, truly. But the percentages started to come down nationwide, as well as here in the state of Florida, so that today it's only 2% naming HIV/AIDS as the single most important health issue. Doesn't mean we're home free about it, of course. We're still waiting for the vaccine, and in other parts of the world, it's a significantly greater challenge than in here. But you can read the rest of the percentages. I think the astonishing dramatic increase, and it's happened just in the last few years, about obesity and overweight as a challenge for this country fits exactly with the reality of what we see and experience day to day, but also to the reality that the media is covering it extensively, drawing attention to this challenge and to all the many problems that it brings up. Whose responsibility is it for the huge increase in the amount of obesity in this country? Who's going to pay for changing that? And by the way, how do you change it? How do we really confront it? So it's partly driven by the facts on the ground, so to speak, of the complete domination of obesity in our culture, but the media is driving that attention, and the media will be helping us understand how we cope with it. So this has changed a good deal over time. Most of the questions we asked, however, have not changed all that much over a 15-year period. A little bit of change, yes, not a lot. Nothing as dramatic as that first question. So you can see here that Floridians continue to want more coverage of science and research in the media. Not as high a percentage saying more as 15 years ago, but still very, very strong percentages. So that, for those of you who are seeking careers in this field going forward, careers in media, you're going into a field where there's tremendous public demand. The kinds of media are shifting, but the demand for it is intense and very much include health, science, and medical issues. Now, some other questions, some of these we asked before, but I'm not going to show you all the comparisons. They pretty much stack up as about the same over 15 years. Overwhelmingly, people in Florida say that this state should be a leader in science and medical research. Now, this is an expression of aspiration. This is what people want. And I think it's quite remarkable that even at a time of as we read and hear about, where people are quite discouraged about the economy of the nation, they're discouraged about our political leaders, and the list goes on, they still maintain a very high level of aspiration for U.S. leadership, and in this case, for Florida leadership. That's important for Florida in particular. It's an important leadership opportunity for people in public office, because at the moment, Florida ranks way below its population rank in terms of its ability to attract dollars from the National Institutes of Health, or NIH. This is quite striking. This is an opportunity for growing Florida's engagement with medical research via federal dollars attracted from the National Institutes of Health. In other states, North Carolina is a good example, where the decision has been made some years ago, almost 30 years ago in North Carolina, to really step up and invest in the infrastructure of the state, the higher ed infrastructure and other aspects of their economy in order to attract more federal funding and private sector funding for research. We saw North Carolina develop the now very well-known Research Triangle Park and see their ranking for attracting NIH funding being much higher than their state population rank. So there are opportunities for growth, but it often comes through a deliberate decision in a state to make that happen. So a related question here is that we ask, in terms of jobs and incomes, how important do you think spending money on scientific research is to Florida's economy? And you can see here that people say either strongly or somewhat, pretty much, a very high percentage, 80% when you combine the two, say that this is a good way for Florida to drive economic growth. And they're right, people are right, because jobs associated with science tend to be better paid and more satisfying to individuals, the kind of jobs they want to have themselves or they aspire to for their children and grandchildren. Now, people aren't quite as sure that the prospects for job creation in Florida are going to increase. They think it's a good thing. They're not so sure they're going to increase. Now, I would say that across the board, people are worried about jobs increasing in every arena. And so they're not quite sure how this is going to happen. But this is still a pretty robust finding. And people can connect the dots, that one of the ways that you create more jobs as you create more opportunity for young people. So there's strong support here too. And I would say all this adds up to strong support for political leaders or want-to-be leaders, those challenging the incumbents, to really talk about and mean it and have plans for developing more science-based industry in the state, industry and education and opportunities. Now when you ask people, here's a telling question. When you ask people, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to pay for it? Because ultimately, it's probably going to be people on the ground, people paying taxes or otherwise helping support the creation of new job opportunities, new elements of the state's economy. So you can see here that not everybody's willing to pay taxes. I would say that this has to be considered in context. Many people would say that 40% of people saying they'd pay more in taxes for anything right now is in fact high. I would be one of those people who would say that. I would also say that this is a compared to what kind of question. What would you be willing to pay more in taxes for right now? And this may be one of the few things that people are willing to, at least hypothetically, reach into their pocket for. But it's a key question because ultimately there has to be an investment in the future, not just sitting back and hoping that it will happen. Hope is not a strategy. Now, on a different kind of topic, we like to see what the recognition level is of people, the people see whether they can identify, for example, a living scientist. Now, most people in this state, and I might add, is true all over the country, cannot. So 82% just say off the top, right away, that they can't give the name of a living scientist. Now, it's, people may be wondering, gee, I wonder if this person is alive or dead or whatever, but just that immediate response is pretty discouraging, that 82% can't name a living scientist. And you can see, for those who say, yes, I can, you can see who they do name, and Stephen Hawking is just head and shoulders above everybody else. Now, it's better for journalists. Although 60% of people can't name a living journalist. What? You know, are they not paying attention? They're not watching anything on the news, not even, you know, Jon Stewart or, you know, anybody? No. You can see what the array is here, but it just shows you that people seem to get tongue-tied about giving the name of a scientist, which is really awfully hard, or even a journalist. This is a little hard to read, but it's basically a ranking of trustworthiness of media, with traditional, what we call traditional media, coming out on top, newspapers, television, magazines, coming up ahead of social media in terms of trustworthiness. But there is room for things, for a lot of give and take in this kind of data presentation. But it does, I think, underscore the fact that traditional media is still out there and influential, and people do look to it for their information and for ways to help them form opinions, even if they can't remember the journalist's name who is reporting on the topic. Now, speaking of trust, we ask a, I think, interesting question about, you know, 5 years ago. Try to think back yourself. This is not comparing data from 5 years ago, but it's a hypothetical question asking people, compared to 5 years ago, would you say you trust the following more or less or the same amount? So there's 3 categories. Do you trust the scientific community more or less or the same, media, and elected officials? And I'd like to know who the 7% are that trust elected officials more. Do you know any of those people? So maybe those are Florida, Florida's outstanding senators and congressional delegation, in any case. The scientific community does very well here, 16% being trusted more. And at the 10% level, there's more trust for the media. But look at all those reds, you know, trust less. We know that about elected officials, you know, at an all-time low congressional, you know, their support and respect for the Congress is at an all-time low. The media, 40% less trust, not so good, and 20% less trust for the science community. And when we were doing this kind of polling 20 years ago, we weren't seeing this kind of drop off. So that just seems to be pervading our society right now, even though, remember, that high aspirational value of caring about and wanting more science and medical research, jobs in your state, attention in the media. This is something that people care about in, I would say, a deep down way, but they can't put a human face on it. They don't know where research is conducted, they don't know who's conducting it, and they're not sure how to support it. And that's where Research America's work is really hopefully making a difference. One of our goals is to make sure that elected officials are hearing from people in the science community as they make public policy decisions. But we also want elected officials to hear from voters, from people in general, about the value of science and research. And that's the advocacy part of our work. The other part of our work is about public education, about helping the public understand, not only be educated about, quote unquote, in a more classroom specific kind of way, or classroom typical way, but understand and have access to information that they otherwise wouldn't get directly, including, of course, information about science and medical research in particular, and that's why this program is organized today. So I refer you, before we turn it over to the next speaker, I refer you to our release that came out today about the poll, and it has the complete poll findings attached via a click on the release or on our website generally. And if you have questions or observations about the poll data, both I and all my colleagues at Research America would be happy to talk with you about it. And thanks very much. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here today.
It's my great pleasure to extend a warm sense of gratitude to members of the USF community and those traveling from further afield. This, as most of you know, is the first time that we've held such an important discussion of this kind at the University of South Florida. Thank you, Mary, for that overview of a truly fascinating study. As Mary sat down, she whispered to me, perhaps you can use this, and most assuredly, I and my colleagues at the University of South Florida and across the state university system will, I'm sure, benefit greatly from some of the findings that you've presented. So again, thank you for joining us, and Jay, thank you for all the hard work that you and Dean Eisenberg, Dean Lilla, and Associate Dean Bob Potter have put into making today's session a reality. It makes, of course, altogether good sense that, that you've finally found your way to the University of South Florida. For a relatively young university, our remarkable trajectory, I think, in scientific accomplishments and research prominence is perhaps unprecedented in this country. Yet, as we've heard, conducting good science isn't enough. We have much work to do. In fact, I believe that STEM is a convenient yet overused and ill-understood buzz acronym in American society today. To many, it's been viewed as the panacea to this nation's arguably diminished position in the 21st century global marketplace of ideas, and essential to maintaining our worldwide leadership in innovation. Yet, it's not really clear to many that the increasingly complex world of science is particularly well understood by the lay public or even by our policy makers in Washington, or for that matter, in Tallahassee. The nature and the significance of scientific discovery to everyday life, while championed by many, the relevance, the benefits are rarely articulated particularly well by our scientists and our educators within the academy. I think many of us recognize that. Indeed, perhaps it's the prevailing condition of scientific illiteracy and not our intellectual capital and ready embrace of innovation that serves as the greatest threat to our future here in Florida and nationwide. To this end, I certainly welcome this timely and important discourse and challenge my colleagues at the University of South Florida to assume a leadership role in more effectively communicating the value of their scientific work.